Some things are so traumatic that it's right then and there. Most police officers usually will start working in the town that they grew up in. When something happens traumatically, it's to somebody they usually know. They're doing CPR on a friend's grandmother, or they're going to a fatal car accident that's a kid they went to high school with, or it's somebody's child that they know.
G'day, and welcome to Wellbeing. I'm Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with Scott Hyder, a retired Boston police officer and founder of charity Hidden Battles. Scott is journeying with PTSD, which resulted from a string of some bad 911 homicide calls. The experiences Scott had affected him deeply and have left him with PTSD. After leaving the police force, Scott founded Hidden Battles, a not-for-profit organisation that strives to help returning soldiers and first responder veterans with PTSD. In this episode, Scott talks about how the trauma he experienced affected him and how he manages his PTSD so he can still live his life to the fullest. Hello, Scott, and welcome to Wellbeing.
No, thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate it.
Before we begin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Scott?
I am I'm a married father with two children, one in college, one in first grade. I am a 10-year Army veteran. I'm a retired police officer. I struggle with post-traumatic stress and depression.
How did you come to be involved with the police force?
When I got out of the Army, I was looking for that community, like that brotherhood, that sisterhood. What the Army brings to you, the Army brings you that camaraderie, like a family. So when I got out of the Army, I was really looking for that camaraderie. And when I was younger, I grew up on a bad part of the city in Boston, in a suburb, and I was actually, I would say, intervened a bunch of times by a police officer who was very familiar with my brother. My brother was, he was into shenanigans and dabbled in crime a little. So there was this one police officer who constantly used to grab me and intervene on, things that we were doing. I was looking for camaraderie. I was looking for that brotherhood, that community. And I wanted to give back to what was given to me, in a sense of save me from a life of crime. So I just wanted to help out and return the favor in a sense.
What area of police work did you commonly work in during your time there?
So when I started, I was just a regular patrolman. I answered calls of service, reports of crime, did crime deterrent. And then eventually I became a traffic enforcement officer. And then I specialized in commercial motor vehicle law. So I did a lot of commercial motor vehicle inspections and compliance and just checked like big rigs. I'm not sure what you guys would call them, but the tractor trailer units. So I did inspections and safety inspections on those.
What kind of experiences did you have during your time on the force that might have brought on the PTSD?
I was involved in 2 murder-suicides. One I was directly involved with. Earlier that day, I was being civilly sued by an individual because we were both involved in a motorcycle ride that was at a charity. A friend of mine's son had muscular dystrophy, and we had gone out for a motorcycle ride that day, and the individual caused a crash, and he tried suing me civilly that day, and he didn't win. And later that evening, him and his wife got into an argument, and he had actually shot her and then tried to take his own life. And I was directly involved in that because I was the second person to respond to that call. Roughly 2 weeks later, I received a 911 call, and it turned out that it was a 16-year-old girl was shot and killed by her father. And her father had taken his life, and he had shot the mother, but we managed to save the mother's life. And I stumbled across that. It came in as a 911 call, which is in America, it's like an emergency call. So if you need emergency help, medical or whatever, you can dial 911. And it came in as that, and then the line went dead. So not expecting the worst, I actually started to search the house, and I stumbled across the bodies. And that was very traumatic to me because I wasn't prepared for it mentally. As police officers, when you get dispatched to calls, you start to mentally prepare yourself for them, whether it's a domestic or it's a medical. As you drive into the call, you're thinking, all right, I have to pop the trunk and get the medical bag out, or I have to start thinking about CPR, or I have to really start to put my negotiating hat on to deal with 2 individuals that are arguing with each other. But I didn't have that. I literally walked into this thinking it was a 911 hang-up, which is very common in the United States. People dial 911 by accident. And that's what I thought I was getting. And I was completely blindsided by it. Then about 2 years later, my brother had taken his life, and my brother had called me up on a Saturday night, and he was very distraught. And I ended up talking to him, and I was currently at work. And I told him that I told him I loved him, and that he was talking about moving to another state. And I said, you know what, you got to do what you got to do. I love you. I said, I'll call you in the morning. He says, all right, sounds great. The next morning, I slept in because I worked overnight. didn't think anything of it. Monday morning, I had reached out to him. I sent him a text message saying, hey, you all right? After our talk, and I didn't hear from him. Tuesday, I sent him a message. I'm thinking maybe he's mad at me, or maybe he's just busy. Wednesday, I started to get my sixth sense going, and I thought maybe something was wrong. And I ended up going to his apartment and opened the door up because I had a key, and I found that he had taken his life. So that really started to trigger a lot of things for me. I continued to go to work, but my work performance kind of was going downhill. My mind really wasn't in the game anymore. And it wasn't that I knew what post-traumatic stress was. I didn't know what depression was. I just thought I was in a funk. And then slowly things started happening where it started taking a toll on my mental health. So I started getting involved in suicide prevention. I started working with local organizations. I started doing public speaking. Yet I still didn't realize that I had post-traumatic stress. And it wasn't until I really started to do more research later on, maybe about 5 or 6 years later, and I started to reach out to my Army buddies saying, hey, I'm not doing well. I'm on the couch. I can't get off the couch. I became a master of not doing anything all day, but then cramming a day's worth of work into an hour to make it seem like I was busy all day. So when my wife came home, she didn't realize what I was going through. So what happened was I got injured in a bad crash at work, and I was literally laid up. I had to have a neck surgery. I was doing physical therapy. And I started to gain a lot of weight, and I wasn't feeling good about myself. The depression was there again, but now I felt like the depression was because I wasn't at work. And that's what my excuse was now. It wasn't the fact that I was never dealing with a bunch of the stuff I'd gone through. So I started to go to a therapist, and the therapist really didn't help me. As police officers and military, we don't sit around and talk about our feelings very well. We don't open up and say, hey, you know what? This is what's happening. We're very hard when we go to trust other people because we feel like we're being judged. And then in the United States, we have a thing called unfit for duty. If you're mentally, I would say mentally unwell, they can say that you're unfit for duty, and then you're not able to be a police officer. So that is a big fear with police officers, with firefighters, with EMTs, which is emergency medical technicians, paramedics and stuff. I went to a therapist. I didn't really talk to him openly because I really didn't trust him. And then I just started reaching out to my Army buddies because my Army buddies I knew I could trust. They started to tell me go rucking. Rucking is backpacking for you guys. So I started to backpack, and I started feeling better. I was getting out. I was forcing myself out. And then what I did was I reached out on Facebook, and I had said to in a local group saying, hey, you know what? I'm going through some stuff. Would you guys care to join me? After about 6 to 8 weeks, I had like 20 people backpacking with me, and they were all first responders. They were all police, firefighters, and even, some medical stuff. So what I did was I said to my wife, I'm feeling better. And she said, well, you've always wanted to do something for your brother. We wanted to do a college scholarship for him. So I said, let's raise some money. Well, what happened was we raised a lot of money. And when we did, I said, you know what, we should probably do programs. And my wife jumped on board, and my sister jumped on board, and a couple of friends that were involved with the suicide prevention prior to me starting Hidden Battles jumped on board. And I said, well, let's do programs. Let's do programs that not only take care of the individual, but also take care of them and their wives or couples, spouses, support system, and then their children. Because it's like dropping a rock in the water. What happens is the ripples affect everybody. And when we come home from work, we're bringing that trauma home. We're not talking about it. We're bringing home the bad news. We're bringing home like the bad personality and the substance abuse if we're drinking heavily, or abusive relationships and toxic relationships. And we're bringing that home. So I said, why don't we start working on these things to try to help people? Because like me, my performance at work had gone downhill. I was calling out of work sick. I was looking for reasons not to go to work, and I didn't know what it was. And for me to get out there and start to get people to open up and say, hey, you know what? I'm like this guy. And we developed this community. We built a community of like-minded people going through the same exact thing who now feel safe to come out and be themselves around each other without the fear of being judged or going, I can't believe you said that,
How common would you say PTSD is in those that are police officers?
Oh, it's very common, and it's so underdiagnosed. You think of this, all right? You think most police officers usually will start working in the town that they grew up in. They grow up, even firefighters, nurses, paramedics, stuff like that. These are the people that grow up in the neighborhoods, and they grow up in the part of town that they want to serve. They want to keep good or make better. When something happens traumatically, it's to somebody they usually know. They're doing CPR on a friend's grandmother, or they're going to a fatal car accident that's a kid they went to high school with, or it's somebody's child that they know. I mean, it's very traumatic. There's ways to deal with it. Some people deal with it naturally and organically just by normal everyday activities, and some people just don't. Some people really, it dwells on them or it doesn't process as well.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. Today we are speaking with American police officer Scott Hyder about his journey with PTSD. You mentioned some of the experiences you had that may have brought on the PTSD. When did you kind of first start to realise that something was going on, like mentally?
I would tell you, I think when that really started to hit me was when I wasn't really dealing with my brother. And what I was noticing was certain times of the year I would become a real, I was an ass, I was like really miserable to be around, and my wife would tell me, and I felt bad, but it was just how I was becoming. And then she told me I really should start talking to somebody. I should really see somebody, because obviously it was affecting me, and I wasn't dealing with the loss of my brother, which was really a catalyst for everything else I was going through. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back, that final crack in the dam that broke the dam. And that's what it was for me.
So in a lot of ways, PTSD is something that doesn't just happen straight away. It gradually kind of develops?
For some people, yeah, absolutely. Some things are so traumatic that it's right then and there. And a lot of people, it's a misunderstanding. People honestly think that post-traumatic stress is exclusive to veterans, police, fire, and people in like life-saving instances or professions, right? And it's not. Post-traumatic stress is not susceptible. It's susceptible to everybody. You could have post-traumatic stress because you were in a car accident. You fell off your bike as a child. You were in a volatile relationship, or you had an abusive parent, or you were mugged or sexually assaulted, or it could be anything. And people just really need to realize and almost figure out the signs and symptoms for it, because it could be like a sexual assault would be instant, but like an abusive relationship might take you a little while to feel that like you have that post-traumatic stress.
Did you find it hard to first, like when you first started talking about these experiences, did you find it hard to open up about them?
I did to my therapist, I did, yes. Because I was really guarded. I was trying to figure out what I could say to him without making him think that I was completely crazy. And I'm not an advocate for medicine. I don't like taking medicine at all. And I didn't want him to put me on medicine thinking that. And honestly, I didn't want him to diagnose me worse or truly diagnose me and find out that I was actually worse than I was. So I was kind of guarded. However, in the community of veterans and first responders, and even now with you, talking to you, I have no problem telling anybody my story. I have no problem telling everybody my signs and symptoms or what I've been through, because I feel that helping other people is helping me. And I'm dealing with it. Every day is me dealing with my post-traumatic stress.
When you got that diagnosis of PTSD, how did you feel? Did it offer any closure on like why you might have been doing some of the things you were doing?
Absolutely. It gave me something to work on now. It's kind of like a car. If you have a car and you're bringing it to the mechanic and it's making a noise, you immediately think it's something really bad, or you really think it's something that it's not. But until you get that diagnosis from your mechanic who says, oh, it's just this or just that, you don't know what you're dealing with. When I finally was told I had post-traumatic stress and depression, I was like, oh, well, now I can deal with this. Now I know what I'm dealing with, and now I know what I need to do deal with it.
Is there much support for police veterans with PTSD?
Yeah, you know what? Where we are in the United States, there's a lot of support. I am in Massachusetts. I'm about 40 minutes outside of Boston. We're in a city called Lowell. I actually live in New Hampshire. I'm only 8 miles from the city of Lowell. New Hampshire has great programs for law enforcement and veterans. Massachusetts is coming a long way with law enforcement and veterans, to the point that we have so many nonprofits that are picking up the slack that the Veterans Administration should be doing, and the police department should be doing, and the fire department should be doing, and even our medical facilities should be doing. But lately, because of COVID, and now we're seeing a big giant thing of post-COVID, post-traumatic stress, everybody's getting on board with mental health, and it's about time.
Do people in the police sector usually talk about like mental health and PTSD? Is that getting better?
It is getting better, yes. We do a support group on Tuesday nights, and our support groups can go from anywhere from 9 to 20 people on a Tuesday night. but we're getting more and more people because know what's happening. We're getting men and women that are very respected in these fields, whether it's law enforcement or fire and medical, and they're coming out as advocates and they're saying, hey, you know what? It's all right to get help. It's all right to not be okay. You just need to get diagnosed. You need to start doing something about it. And when people see these people who are so affluent in this profession come out and say that, it kind of goes, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This guy is right. Because if he's saying it's all right, then nobody's going to talk bad about me. And once they start to get that help and they start to understand that maybe just getting help, it doesn't even matter like the degree of post-traumatic stress that you have. You might have a mild case of it. But if you get out and you start to talk with people and you start to see how I deal with mine and say a couple of the other veterans that we have on our staff are dealing with theirs, it might help them to the point that they'll never get really bad. They'll start to learn how to manage it. They'll start to learn how to deal with it. Like I said, instead of just keep letting it pile up and pile up.
What are some ways that you deal with your PTSD? How do you manage it?
I just found out this, and it was explained to me by a doctor who that we work with. Certain times of the year, I become a miserable bastard. It's just the way it is, right? And it's usually anniversary dates. And it's not something that I do on purpose. It's like my internal bio clock does it to me, like on a calendar. I know that right around the end of February, I start getting really miserable. And that's when those 2 murders happened. Then around May and 1st of June, I start getting miserable again because that starts coming into my brother's death anniversary. But how I manage it is I try to stay active and I try to keep myself surrounded with people that understand what I've been going through. My family is very supportive. I have made so many friends and I've met so many people because of what has happened to me. And that seems to help me. I have my friends that'll call me up knowing that my brother's anniversary will be coming up. And they say, hey, how are you? And I'm like, good. And they're like, hey, let's do a ruck. Let's do a memorial ruck for your brother. Or what I did was I came up with a ruck I tried to do it on the 22nd. The first one I did was on November 22nd. And it's called the 22 for the 22, because in the United States, we have 22 veterans take their lives daily, an average. So when COVID kicked off, what we did as Hidden Battles, we used to go into the nursing homes and we would hang out with all the old veterans from like World War II and Korea and Vietnam, because by us being with them, it made us feel better. You know, we were building a camaraderie and we were talking and engaging, and it made us feel better because of that. And then when COVID kicked off and they weren't letting us into any nursing homes anymore, I said, well, we got to do something still. I got to keep engaged, because if I don't, that was one of the things that helped kept me center. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I said, I'm going to ruck. I'm going to go hiking and I'm going to do a 22-mile ruck. So I put it out on social media, told a couple people that's what I was going to do. And next thing I know, I had 80 people join me. On May 22nd, before Memorial Day, I said, let's do another one, because my brother's death anniversary is May 27th. And I was I need to do something. There was that bio clock starting to kick in.
Yep.
So I said, I'm going to do another one. So I said, I'm going to do another 22 for the 22, and we're going to do another 22 miles. I put it on Facebook and I put it on Instagram and everything else. And I had 256 ruckers come out and join me. And we did that. And those are the things that help me. Helping veterans get into programs, helping police and fire acknowledge that they have a problem and get them into programs. And that's what helps me. Daily, it helps me.
Do you think that wider society understands PTSD?
I don't. I don't think that people have the compassion for it that they should. I think when somebody says, well, that's what they signed up for, is ignorance, because nobody signs up to, listen, we all know that there are going to be horrible things that could possibly happen to us. But nobody signs up knowing that I may be doing CPR on a 3-year-old boy that drowned in a pool, or I might be doing CPR or chest compressions on my godson, or Mrs. Smith who lives next door, I might find her dead one day. Nobody signs up for that. They understand that that's what it is and that may happen, but that's not something. And when people say things like, oh, they signed up for it, so they need to deal with it, that's what really starts to dishearten police officers and veterans and fire and EMS and stuff. We know it's a possibility, but it's not what we signed up for.
How might we work on that understanding in society? Is it education?
Oh, absolutely. My thought process is it's the only way to change hearts and minds is education on all aspects of everything in life. If you don't educate yourself and you don't meet and interact with those people, you're never going to know how other people live. And that's why I like doing public speaking. I go to public speaking and I explain to people, this is what happens. And this is what happens to not only myself, but my family. And this not only affects me, but it also affected every person I interacted with while being a police officer.
Did you ever get this sense, Scott, that you wanted, like, you had the PTSD and you wanted to get rid of it, but you just couldn't? Was there that kind of feeling?
I will tell you, sometimes you think it's gone and then it comes right back. So you have triggers. There are things that you say, you're like, oh, like there's months that go by where not only myself, but other people are doing great. And I have a friend that we've made through the organization. His name's Matt. We call him Cap Marowdy. In the fall, Matt and I have lots of conversations. I am triggered by the smell of burning leaves and burning trash. When I was deployed to the Balkans during the Kosovo peace campaigns, it was constantly smelling burning trash and burning leaves and foliage and tires. So when I get those smells, that's a trigger for me. And I start to get kind of anxious and stuff like that. But there are months that are great. And then there's a trigger that happens. And when you start to learn how to manage your triggers, then things seem to work all right for you.
You're listening to Wellbeing, a nationally distributed radio show and podcast. Today we are speaking with American police officer Scott Hyder about his journey with PTSD. Was there a moment that you can recall where you kind of just said to yourself, I need to get some help with this? Like that first moment when you kind of said, right, I'm going to undertake recovery.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have a clinician on staff that I talk to daily about stuff when I start to notice things are going bad. But yeah, there's a bunch of organizations that I work with right now that I've kind of put myself on the back burner, not mentally, but I'm doing well, so I can do this. But there are a couple organizations that I'm going to go away on some retreats with. But when I'm not doing well, I know that I can call up my clinician and talk to her. I know that I can call up, like, say, Matt, or I can call up my marketing director, Chris, who's also in law enforcement, or I can even talk to my wife or even my sister who is in medical. So when I know that I'm not doing well, I have my support system that I can talk to.
What are the ways that a family member can help then? Is it by understanding the person that has the PTSD?
Absolutely, it is. But then it also goes on to them having their own PTSD from dealing with us. But yeah, there are days that my wife knows that I'm not in a good mood, and she can kind of sense it, and she kind of lets me know, or she'll kind of help me out a little more doing something else. Or sometimes she just lets my son know, because I have a 7-year-old, and she'll let him know, like, oh, dad's just not doing well today. And then he's like the most lovable kid on the planet, so he'll come up and he'll hug me, and he'll try to make me happy or grab me, or if, like one of the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress is irritability. And if I'm irritable, he'll get me a bottle of water. Like, he understands now. And I think when families understand and know what's going on, they're not so much to be like, why is this guy such an ass? Or why are you being an ass today? They kind of know now. Now it's kind of like, all right, we'll give him a little more space or be a little more tolerant,
What are some things in daily life that are different for you as someone with PTSD than to other people that don't have PTSD?
I think sometimes we have to try a little harder to be a little more understanding, because with me, like my temper, as far as like, I'm not like abusive, but I snap and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I'll do that. And it's not the fact like it's abusive, but I think with people who don't have post-traumatic stress, I think have a little more patience. And like I said, a lot of people who have this trait of being the like firm parent, or maybe just a little too firm, and I'm not talking heavy-handed, but maybe yelling a lot or whatever, should really go back and look at their lifestyle, because they could have had a very traumatic, upbringing with an abusive father, abusive mother. And it's almost like we're starting to roll that over into our life now, where I think if somebody grew up and they didn't have so much post-traumatic stress, they might have a little more patience, and that's something we got to work on as parents. And, it's something I've been doing. I will tell you, when I had my daughter, I have a 19-year-old in college. When I had her, my patients were a lot better. But then I said, my brother was taken from me in 5 years, back in 2012, 10 years ago. My son's 7. He's now, unfortunately, he's in the post-traumatic stress, era of dad.
How can we better support police that do have PTSD?
I think what happens to happen is the administration needs to recognize it. They need to help with fear of not losing their jobs. Because if you think about it, as sad as it is, law enforcement and public safety is a product, right? It's a product of healthy individuals, educated individuals, people with compassion, problem solving, communication skills. When you start to get a police officer who is starting to lose those skills because of post-traumatic stress. The product of public safety is really starting to decline. All right. So if you start to say discipline this person because he is now yelling at people on a car crash, or he's starting to abuse his sick time, or he's starting to drink a little, or, substance abuse or something, instead of going after his job or not asking questions or interviewing him and asking him what's happening in your life to make it, because we notice that you're snapping a lot at people, or your reports aren't really well, or you're not handling calls the way you should be professionally. Instead of suspending them or writing them up or giving them, demerits or whatever, sit them down and ask them what the problem is. Or maybe there's an underlying problem that they don't know. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they have a sick child at home, or a mom with cancer, or something other going on. When you start to engage with communication and dialogue, you're going to discover that some things just may not be right. But when they start to do that, which it's amazing, because in Massachusetts, they're starting to hire clinicians to work in police departments. They're starting to have peer support groups for other officers to identify individuals who might be at risk of post-traumatic stress. And when they start doing that, which is great, we can start to curve what's happening with post-traumatic stress. We can start to save more lives. We can start to save more careers. And we're actually now turning out a better product for the communities with a safer, a more healthier police officer.
Despite the traumatic experiences, Scott, and the effects that it had on you, did you love the work that you did as a police officer?
I absolutely loved it. At one time, I was the traffic and safety officer, and I did a lot of safety fairs, and I did bike safety and wrote grants to get helmets for kids. And I did car seat inspections and put kids in car seats, and went to school, and I talked to kids, and I read books, and, I held bike rodeos where kids bring all their bikes and we tuned them up, and they did like obstacle courses. I did Marine patrol. I really loved engaging the public. I really loved to problem solve and help the quality of life of the people that I served, be better. And that was like my purpose in life was to be. I joined the military to help people. I was deployed to Africa, where I built schools. I restored water to villages. I was in Panama. I did the same thing. I built churches. I helped create, we did a lot of good things, like humanitarian missions. And when I became a police officer, I wanted to return that favor. I wanted to help. If I could help one person, I'd return the favor. But I know I impacted a lot of people's lives positively. And that was realistically what I loved about it.
Where are you going to from here? What do you hope for the future for you?
My goal would be just to become more regional. I would love for hidden battles programs to be kicking off in other states. I would love to pass the torch on to other people. I'm 49 years old. I'm retired. Hidden battles is my job. I volunteer all my time. I actually lose a lot of money doing hidden battles. I would honestly love to pass the torch on to somebody who has the fire and passion in their heart to continue it and to make it grow. I mean, it's obviously a cause that's needed, and I would love to retire and sit back and, come to like the Christmas party, or go check out, Hidden Battles, Florida, or drive out to Hidden Battles, Wyoming, or Hidden Battles, Melbourne. You know what I mean?
I do get it. Yeah. For the listeners that are listening right now, how can they help? How can they donate? Where can they go?
So they can go, we have our hiddenbattlesfoundation.org. So it's www.hiddenbattles.org. You can go there. You can check us out on Facebook. We have Hidden Battles Foundation. And then we have the Hidden Battles group. The Hidden Battles group is designed for the people who join. It's designed for people to go in and create conversation with people and say, hey, you know what? I'm dealing with this. And I guarantee out of the 1,800 people in that group, somebody's going to say, I read this article, or, hey, I'm going to send you a private message because I've gone through that. They can check us out on Instagram. But like Facebook is the way we are. If you want to donate to us, there is a donate link right on our Hidden Battles page, on the hiddenbattlesfoundation.org page. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, not even with money alone, the biggest way to support us is spread the word. Let people know that are suffering, in silence, that there's somebody out there to listen to them.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Scott.
I appreciate it, Jack. Thank you so much.
My guest today was Scott Hyder, retired American police officer and founder of charity Hidden Battles. Tune in next week where we talk with a firefighter about their PTSD journey. And if you like this content, check out the rest of our series on PTSD. Thank you for listening. I'm Jack Hodgins, and all of us at Wellbeing wish you well.